Salams, you're watching NewsClick. We're coming to you from our studios here in New Delhi, and we're talking about the return today, to begin with, of more than 300,000 Palestinians to the northern part of Gaza. They're, of course, moving as we, people on the ground, reporters on the ground, agencies on the ground are covering however they can from the south to the completely destroyed northern part of Gaza. We'll be talking about how the Trump administration is looking at this ceasefire, what its broader implications might be, including on, of course, the occupied West Bank and East Jerusalem. We'll also be talking about the broader context of deportations and how the Trump administration is taking on some of its closest allies, not just in its neighborhood, that is in Latin America, but also as far to the east as India. Joining us to talk about all of these things and to connect the dots between all of these movements going on around the world is NewsClick Editor-in-Chief Prabir Purkayastha. Prabir, as always, good to see you. We'll begin with what is, I suppose, heartbreaking scenes that continue, but with great, I think, joy, probably, the people of Gaza are moving back to what used to be their home. How have things gone over the past couple of days? And what do you see in terms of the immediate requirements, the most pressing concerns that these people will face, because there's no infrastructure left in the northern part of the Strip?
So let's take it in three parts, the question. One is the fact they're going back. Yeah. And this is against essentially the stated objectives of Israel, who had said we will not let them come back. This is going to be something which will be created. We can resettle some of our population, quote unquote, our population over there, but we'll not let them come in. Now, this is what is the Netzarim corridor. Let me take you through this. This is essentially the Netzarim corridor, and this was supposed to be manned by Israeli forces and not let people go in. This whole area was to be razed to the ground and then resettled through Israeli settlers coming in. So that has patently failed. The people are coming back. Yes, there are watchtowers over here. There are pictures of how they are being monitored so that arms, ammunition do not get back. But as we know, Gaza is not connected only through the overground routes. There are also underground tunnels which seem to have connected Gaza. So we do not know how much of that can be controlled by the Israeli forces.
Right.
But essentially, as you said, a completely devastated landscape. You can see the pictures of that, within which people are still willing to come back because they think it's their home and they can rebuild. Some parts of it may be reusable. A large part of it will have to be razed to the ground in order for new structures to come up and make it livable. In the meanwhile, it's still their home. So they want to stay, if necessary, in 10 cities maybe, but still come back to what they fought for, and finally what has been achieved, that Israel had to vacate Gaza. And I think that's a very important political landmark in what has happened in Gaza.
Along this corridor, Prabir, we're learning that a private American security company is doing the initial stage of checking for vehicles that are crossing over. And then there are also Egyptian and Jordanian troops or police officers who are stationed there to further monitor some of these movements. How do you see the involvement of external players, particularly in the context of what Trump has been saying about the movement of Palestinians?
Well, the issue is not who's monitoring it, but who is not. That it is not Israeli soldiers who are monitoring it and deciding who will go in and who will not. So I think that's a big change. And I think this is one of the reasons that this whole issue of truce was held up for a long time.
Mm.
That Netzarim corridor was going to be really the dividing line between those who wanted a settlement and those who didn't.
Mm.
And those who didn't said they should be kept vacant of all Palestinian people.
Right.
And we should get our settlers back in, resettle Gaza, this part of Gaza with Israeli settlers.
Mm.
And I think that is the big, in that sense, backing down
Yeah.
that the Zionist state had to do.
Mm.
And the US finally decided, particularly Trump, that before his inauguration day, he wanted a formal declaration of peace in Gaza.
Right.
And I think that's what finally tipped the balance against Israelis,
Mm.
because it didn't seem that they had any chance otherwise. And even the Israeli military, as you know, had declared time and again, we have achieved whatever aims we could. There is nothing really further left for us to do.
Mm.
And it is taking a deep toll on essentially an army which is not an army which fights professionally every day,
Mm-hmm.
but an army which is of reservists.
Lot of reservists,
They come in.
Yeah.
When they're called into duty, they have been on duty for more than 400 days.
Yeah.
So therefore, there's nothing new to be achieved, no goal to be achieved, which is what Yoav Gallant, their defense minister, had said,
Mm.
that we have achieved all our goals. And he had said it,
Mm.
I think, 4 or 5 months back,
Mm.
after which he quit as defense minister when
Yeah.
there is no move towards truce. And I
Right.
think those are important steps here. I think the important part is, we can see the pictures later, that this is utterly destroyed.
Yeah.
While these parts destruction is 50%, 60%, 40%. The more south you go,
yeah.
the less the destruction. The closer you are to what is essentially the Israeli territory,
Mm.
the more the destruction. And you can
People are
see
moving.
basically a cart that is here. People have climbed onto it, maybe a motorcycle pulling the cart along, and old people, kids, women. This is the primary refugee population
Yeah.
which is coming back.
Yeah. Maybe we'll come back to this map a little later on, but some figures here from Human Rights Watch that show how dire the situation is. Healthcare being prime among them. At incubators, for example, there are as many as 5 babies to one incubator. There are some details, Prabir, here on the situation of hospitals.
Again, it's interesting to see the figures.
Mm.
North Gaza, as you can see,
Yeah.
0 hospitals functioning. So there are 11 hospitals there. North Gaza, 70% destruction, etc.
Mm.
Gaza City. Then you get some of the hospitals functioning.
Right.
As you go south, the more hospitals are functioning.
Mm.
But even then, out of a total of 18 hospitals, partially functioning hospitals, 7, rest are not functioning.
Not functioning at all.
Field hospitals, 4 out of 11. So that's what the figures are. And it's a very dismal figure because this does not take into account electricity, medicine, and of course, service personnel, doctors, nurses,
Paramedics,
and so on, paramedics, all of that.
Yeah.
Because as we know, number of doctors have been arrested or killed, also paramedics and nurses. So that's a rather bleak picture. And here is, of course, the destruction of Gaza itself. At the southernmost portion, it's about 40 to 50%. As you go north, it's up to 80%. So this is the picture. And I think the figures say that will take about 10, 12 years before Gaza can be rebuilt.
Sure.
Provided, of course, the
They
help
are allowed to.
is allowed.
Yeah.
All those, and there is money to do it as well. So
Yeah.
there are a lot of questions on that. Assuming the Arab states will pay for this resettlement, but it still will take 8 to 10 years before they have rebuilt to what Gaza was before the war.
Right. And in the context then of no power and things like that, we were seeing reports of how people are being asked to bring in solar panels and generators and things like that, so that base level activities can resume. Perhaps some of these even if the buildings are completely destroyed, in tented, like you were mentioning, in tented accommodations, at least doctors and medical personnel can begin to kind of do some of their work. What do you see the most immediate challenges for the people who are returning, and do you see help coming in the immediate sort of period?
I think there is enormous goodwill today for Gaza. So help will come in, particularly from the Arab states, those who have given lip service to Gaza. They'll be forced now to shell out money and other resources. So DG sets, solar panels, batteries, water, how to supply water, medicine, and of course doctors and nurses. As you know, even American doctors and nurses were not only under the scanner, a lot of them actually faced very harsh environment, including arrests, beating up, wounding, etc., etc. So all that history is there. But I do believe that the enormous goodwill that the Palestinians have earned in the struggle for Gaza, I think will be repaid by the kind of support we will see coming into Gaza. Even those states which have, as I said, paid lip service will be forced to ante up some resources, otherwise they would be under the fire of their own citizens. So I believe yes. And there is a lot of hypocrisy among the European states who will now give blood money by all this actions they have taken, including arming the Zionist state, to give some amount of support to say, well, we are actually been neutral. So I think we'll see some support coming in even from the West.
Sort of glossing over the fact that they're also supporting the continued blockade of this part of the world. We'll move on to another critical aspect of Donald Trump 2.0, which is the forced movement, of course, of those who the United States government regards as illegal immigrants, the largest number of whom come from Colombia, India, Mexico, sorry, Mexico, and then of course Mexico shares a border, and India now at number 3 in that figure. Estimates indicate as many as 11 million illegal so-called immigrants in the US, and Trump beginning
but not all of them Indians.
No, in total. Yeah. So Trump beginning to send people back forcibly on planes. A lot going on that front, Prabir. Colombia is probably the US is historically one of its closest allies in that region, but some sort of friction in that relationship.
Yeah, President Petro has not been so willing to bend American stools for quite some time. That is his last election, which he won, of an independent, more Latin America-centric Colombia. So I think that is also where the friction lies, that he doesn't want to cave into whatever Trump's threats are. The issue that he raised was you can't send military planes to deport people. And military planes, we don't know carrying what, should not bring in people like this. So I don't know how that has been resolved. But it is true that he has accepted that he will, whatever they're deporting, Colombia will accept. So that is one step. Mexico has also accepted. The point is they have very little recourse to what the US is threatening, which is really Trump's tariffs. 25%, 50%, etc., etc. Stopping all people from coming into United States, including students. So the threats they hold out are significant and can immediately disrupt the economies of Mexico or any Latin American country for which United States is the biggest player in terms of their economies. So I think that is the reason why Petro has taken a position. Okay, we accept what you are sending, but that has to be done with dignity. That you can't send them manacled.
They are not criminals.
They are not criminals. Manacled, in military flights, dump it like this. It has to be done with certain amount of basic human dignity. And he has also said, well, we are now open to relationships all over the world. We are not going to be America, the US-centric as we were in the past. Petro, of course, came with a more radical platform, though he has not really shown a very strong inclination to fight the United States internationally or at the level of Latin America.
Yeah.
But it does mean that Trump's way of using a sledgehammer on his allies is going to at least cause friction. It is also the same issue with Mexico. And Mexico is, of course, one of its major suppliers of labor, particularly during the season where you need harvesting of grapes, fruits, vegetables, and so on. And Mexico provides that floating labor. So turning its relationships with Mexico an adversarial one can lead to also long-term problems for the United States. Short-term gains, yes. Long-term problem, certainly. And I think it's going to only lead to a more, shall we say, combination of Latin American countries coming together. How to stop this Pax Americana, which Trump is really trumpeting. And what it really means is also that is the Monroe Doctrine back, or can the Latin American countries fight that? So I think that's where we are. It'll be interesting to see how different Latin American countries react
to this,
and how they can come together in terms of trade rather than making their entire trade US-centric.
So which will bring us to, I guess, another close relationship. India and the US, it seems that Trump had a phone call with Prime Minister Narendra Modi of India, talking about this third largest population of illegals, close to 750,000 or so Indians reportedly in the US illegally. Like Trump's office has said that Modi will do what's right. We have no communication from Modi on this yet. But essentially, these are major trade partners, Prabir, for the United States. Major providers of different kinds of labor, whether it's the floating labor, agricultural labor that Mexico provides, or different kinds of, slightly maybe more skilled migrants who travel from India to work in the US, in the tech industry, in the IT industry, where also Trump is waging a war against China. How does this, and India is set to also host a meeting of the Quad countries very soon. So how does all of this factor in for you, and doesn't it push these countries who have independent economic agendas more towards, for example, like we were talking, the BRICS model, closer relations to China, and actually antithetical to whatever Trump is trying to achieve?
Well, Trump's belief is that he has the big stick and he's the really 21st century Rome, and the Roman Empire is the model which United States seems to believe in. Interestingly, when he says 700,000 immigrants, this of course includes a large number of people who are not the IT professionals. They are really the ones who go in, for instance, if you see drive cars, taxis. Of course, a lot of them are legitimate migrants, but also in the service sector, which they go for agriculture, for instance. So there is a large flow of migrants, and I would not venture a guess how many go legally and how many don't. A lot of them also make their way to Canada, as we know, and particularly to British Columbia, where there is a large agricultural population which are from India. So all of that is true. Of course, Trump wants to keep the technical elite, without which the tech industry will have a setback, but re-export the rest back to India. And how India sees this play out, maybe not 700,000, maybe 500,000, how will that play out is going to be interesting, because it of course does show that India, the government of India, would be backing down on an issue in which it would unilaterally accept who is a migrant, illegal migrant, immigrant in the United States or not. Because how does it become our headache than to solve the US problem? But given given that, let's hope that India understands that Trump's relationship with all countries, even its closest allies, is going to be transactional. That I threaten you, you back down, give me tribute, or I will do even more damage to you than you can do to me. So that's a simple relationship Trump believes in.
Right.
And his belief comes from his business expertise. Now don't forget, he had six bankruptcies in the United States as a businessman before he became a successful TV star.
Right.
And as a business tycoon, but on television.
But on television.
So he's still continuing on that trajectory. And his principle seems to be, I threaten you, you back down and you sign on the dotted line what I'm telling you. It didn't work in business. It seemed to have worked on television. Will it work in international politics? The first round didn't show too much of benefit in that. Will this round, where he has sort of cleared all the undergrowth and now he has untrammeled sway, shall we say, will that prove to be better? Better for whom is really the question. I think for the world it's very clear that multilateral adjustments have to be made. And it's clear that India, apart from the BRICS partnership, which it is also investing some political goodwill into, it has also repaired its relationship with China in terms of the northern border.
Right.
Of course, irritants, tensions are going to be there because the border has not been settled, and we know that. It was never settled anyway. McMahon Line at least was a line that was drawn up by the British and Tibet, but not with China, but with Tibet. But leaving that, the other part of the border have been left to negotiations, and those negotiations have never been concluded. So that's going to be an irritant anyway in the relationships. But the second part of it is also river waters. And with the Brahmaputra Dam, we are also planning a dam. All of these things to be mutually resolved, because any river water between the riparian states is a matter of negotiations.
Absolutely.
So those irritants are going to be there. But in spite of that, the trade agreements seem to be moving forward between India and China. And that's a welcome sign, because trade also is joint benefits.
Absolutely.
That India benefits, China also benefits. And how we can play that is to our mutual, how to see our mutual benefits grow, not one at the expense of the other. But it also means that vis-a-vis United States, India now has stakes in also Russia, also in China, and let's not forget, in West Asia, where its relationship with Iran, oil, all of this are going to be important. Then, of course, the most dynamic region economically today, Southeast Asia. And then, of course, we have Africa. Latin America may be distant for us, but certainly we have Africa, old ancient links between India, at least with North Africa, and of course with Southeast Asia. So I think India has to look much beyond just a narrow Eurocentric or an America-centric view of the West-centric view of the world, and look at the world, much like what the BRICS is doing, without an adversarial relationship with either the US or the EU. But how it does that, that is going to be the challenge before the present government. And does the present government have the, what shall we say, the larger vision is the question. Now, Jaishankar is a very adept diplomat. He has shown that. But the question is, what is the larger vision? And that comes from the political party in government. And the whole Chanakya principle is not meant for the modern age. It really is a couple of thousand years old. So how do you adjust to the current age, epoch, which is technology-driven, economy-driven, as much as military-driven? I think that is what we have to observe.
All right, thanks very much, Prabir. We'll leave it there for today. Thank you very much for watching NewsClick and for supporting the work we do, as always. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, do it now. We'll be back mapping more fault lines on NewsClick same time next week. Until then, goodbye.